Hi, my name is Graham Hayward. I'm Managing Director of Housing Hand. Housing Hand are the leading provider of guarantees to the UK rental market. The conversation today is around the Renters' Rights Act, and that's so relevant for Housing Hand because we help manage the risk of those changes in the rental market. I'm delighted today to be joined by Ryan Heaven.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a Consultant Solicitor at Woodstock Legal Services, and I deal with all things letting, so hopefully I'm going to be able to answer some questions today. It will make things easier if I start with some definitions, because we're going to be using a few terms over and over again, and it makes sense not to constantly interrupt and re-explain ourselves throughout. So when we talk about HMOs, we are talking about non-licensable HMOs. We're talking about the broad definition of HMOs. A property may require a HMO license if it's a HMO, but broadly speaking, you do not actually need a license for all HMOs. This is important in context of ground 4A for assured tenancies. PBSA. Now, purpose-built student accommodation are expected to be exempt from many of the rules of the Renters' Rights Bill. We do not yet know how they're going to be exempt, but it's likely going to be an amendment to a schedule of the Housing Act, which currently only applies to university accommodation. So PBSA will be exempt from most of the rules, but there are certain ways in which they will still be affected by things that are in the Renters' Rights Bill. So when we're talking about PBSA and things apply to them, we'll be specifically saying that. Otherwise, by default, PBSA do not get affected by these changes, other than to say that they no longer have assured tenancies.
So Ryan, just to clarify, one of the major changes is that as Renters' Rights Act comes in, that fixed term tenancies fall away. Is that the same for all types of tenancies?
Yeah, so anything which is or would be currently regarded as an assured short hold tenancy, which will be an assured tenancy when the Act comes into force, any fixed term in there will cease to apply. So if you've entered into a contract this side of Renters' Rights coming into force, and the contract is going to take effect from the other side of Renters' Rights Act coming into force, the fixed term is irrelevant. It will simply be a rolling periodic contract. Any fixed term will be scrubbed away. Similarly, any tenancies entered into that start before Renters' Rights Act, even if there's a fixed term remaining, there will cease to be a fixed term remaining. It will just roll from month to month to month. Similarly, the rental periods also get amended. So if you have a rental period of, let's say, a quarter, that quarter becomes a month at the end of the first quarter after Renters' Rights Act comes into force. So again, a monthly rolling periodic contract, regardless of what you signed up to before.
Okay. And PBSAs aren't affected by that, so they still have fixed term tenancies rather than rolling tenancies?
Yes, they have the benefit of being able to create fixed term tenancies. So and they can also require rental periods of different periods to a month, so it can go for their quarterly payments, they can get termly payments, they can get full rent up front if they want to. So yeah, there are fewer restrictions on PBSA when it comes to altering the contract to create the contract that you actually want, rather than with assured tenancies where it's really going to be mandated as to what kind of contract you can create.
The contracts that are currently in force, do they have to be reissued in any way as the new Act comes in, or is there a continuity in some way?
We're waiting to see exactly what the rules are going to be with this. There is likely going to be something produced. Now, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. When the laws changed in Wales, they required certain information to be given to all tenants. I don't think it's going to be quite the same in England. I think they're going to provide some documents that have to be given. I think those documents are going to look an awful lot like the How to Rent Guide. So just basically some general information about what tenancies are, but also a little bit there about what differences have happened, what's changed. There might be two different versions of the How to Rent Guide. You might have a version for current tenants, and you might have a different version for new tenancies, because the new tenancies don't need to cover a lot of the changes. They will simply be the law. So you might get two different versions, but all of these things could be prescribed close to the time by the government. We just don't know exactly what it's going to look like.
And part of the challenge for this must be that we don't know quite when this is going to get enacted, when it's going to get royal assent. And this feels as though it's going to be quite a compacted period when there's going to have to be a lot of communication going on. Is there things people should be doing ahead of time?
Well, aside from thinking about what their processes are going to be, and generally having a good hard think is going to be my stock answer to this. Think about how things can be different. I don't actually think you need to disrupt your day-to-day process is too much. So if you're entering into a contract now, that contract will be enforceable afterwards, even if it's got the words assured short-hold tenancy written on it. Then it will kind of go into two broad buckets. Either it's a tenancy which can be an assured tenancy, so let's just say like a bog standard tenancy, then that will simply become an assured tenancy. You don't need to reissue the contracts unless the government require you to do it. Like I said, I don't think they're actually going to do that. Or if you're PBSA, so suddenly what you were creating was an AST and now suddenly you're creating a non-assured tenancy. Similarly, you don't need to change the contract necessarily. It will still be interpreted in law as being a non-assured tenancy because it's incapable of being anything else legally. So do you need to reissue it? Would it need to if you did? Perhaps. But similarly, I don't think it's necessarily justifies the cost of the paper and ink that it would take to create these contracts.
But the communication with all the parties, for sure.
That's the most important thing, I would say. Yeah, as long as everyone understands what the rules are, and as long as they understand that a fixed term, which might be in the contract, no longer applies. As long as they understand that an assured short-hold tenancy agreement is still a binding tenancy agreement after implementation date, then that is the most important thing: knowledge rather than what is actually written on the paper.
Something like about 70% of housing hand clients are international. And this will complicate the situation more because, of obviously language and not understanding even the basics of what tenancies look like, let alone quite a big change program like this. Yeah,
indeed. When you talk about what people can do now, right, I think it's got to be about messaging the change, because I think the letting agents day to day, you are still handing out tenancy agreements, you're still taking deposits, you're still taking rents. Like all those fundamentals are not that different. But what will be different is just going to be this one-time thing where you are managing this transition of expectation. A tenant might well have signed something and they might well say, I haven't. What have I got? If I have an assured short tenancy, then what do I have now? You can offset that by proactive communication.
And for non-students, it seems to me that in an HMO, right, that the tenancy will continue almost forever.
As long as the tenant wants it to be that way, or indeed unless the landlord has reason to give notice and has the mechanism to give any kind of notice. But if the tenant wants to stay and they pay their rent and they're not antisocial and all the different grounds don't apply to them, then that tenancy can last for as long as it needs to, which means things like guarantor agreements will last that long as well.
Yeah, one of the changes that for working professionals that we will be putting in place is a term, typically a 3-year term maximum, because by that time most people don't need a guarantee. They've got enough track record to say no, I don't need that. We will be modifying that. Although about 90% of our business is with students, about 10% with working professionals. But we are offering for no fee to the HMO with a student where they've gone through this circumstance. We will be offering a complimentary service where we pay for half of the rent for 3 months or up to 3 months. And just to clarify, that a void is available in the circumstance where they're a housing hand guarantor client. So the void cover that we have now put in place, but it's only effective under the new law, where there is a notice given to HMO landlords, that 2 months notice, it's a bit of a surprise for them, so they will potentially have that void period afterwards. So this void service, what it will do is for those housing hand guarantee clients, it's available to the landlord to then make a claim on the housing hand, not as part of the guarantor, but they can make a claim on the housing hand for the guarantee client element of the rent. This is designed to ease the burden, if you like, of a void period where they can remarket and re-get in place. I'm very happy to talk further about that.